Shantihi. Okay, so now we were talking about how this Atma is the truth of everything. Now the next question is, how does one know this Atma? Okay, it seems like a very difficult thing, right? It is elusive. You feel as though you understand, and at the same time it seems like it's so difficult to understand, right? So it is 1 to 23. Okay? It says, Na ayam Atma pravachanena labhyaha na medhaya na bahuna shrutena yam eva esha vrunute tena labhyaha tasya esha atma vivrunute tanum swam. Okay, so that means it says that this Atma cannot be attained through mere recitation of Vedas. Okay, now the entire Veda is all talking about this reality. Okay, so every shloka of the Veda either is a supporting statement or revealing this reality about I being limitless, right? So there are people who go to this Veda Pathashala from young age and they learn how to chant the Vedas very well. Okay, so now, and you can chant. They chant, there is a Taittiriya Upanishad, which is a very famous kind of recitation which they do, which says, Brahma vida apnoti param tadesha bhyukta satyam jnanam anantam brahma yo veda nihitam guhayam parame vyoman. The whole thing, the whole vision is in these 4 lines. But there are people who chant these 4 lines and they have no clue what it means. Okay. They all know how to chant. Any priest, not in the north, they have all. You ask any priest in the south, chant Taittiriya Upanishad. They will know how to chant and all proper swaras and everything. Okay. So that means they can be chanting it for rest of their life and the meaning eludes them.
But I want to know if that vibration is going up.
The vibration itself is a beautiful vibration. It's a lovely thing, because even that intonations are all very, very well, designed to be in harmony with sound system of the universe. It's like when you render classical raga, even if you don't understand what it means, it creates an atmosphere, right? Even if you don't understand how the nuances of how ragas work and what are the permutations and combinations which are allowed, which are not allowed, even if you don't know anything, just this harmony, it creates a harmony and that elevates you. Right? So similarly, that very chanting is beautiful, it elevates you, it creates an atmosphere, but you still don't know what you don't understand what you are doing. Okay? So mere repetition of Vedas will not give you this knowledge. Okay? And also here he says, na medhaya. Medha is what? Memory. So there are also people who just, it's interesting, when they, many of the people, just before they have to give a class, they will listen to our teacher's class and they will what? Repeat. They will repeat exactly what the person says. But if you haven't really understood what you are saying, then what? Even while you are explaining the meaning, its true meaning eludes you. That's a wonder. Okay, so that means it's not even the teacher hasn't understood. Even though you can repeat everything, you just don't understand what it really means. Okay, so it's not a matter of what memory. It's not just matter of repeating somewhat. Oh, a lot of times people say, "Oh yeah, I know I am this limitless Brahman." This is not true. It's like me saying, "Yeah, I know time and space is relative because I understand the theory of the theory to understand." All the nuances and all the intricacies, it takes years of physics. What I'm saying is just one superficial sentence. It doesn't make it into a knowledge. There is a big difference between that becoming a knowledge. Okay, so therefore, mere repeating and memorizing also doesn't give you this knowledge. Okay? And therefore also a lot of people think that once you understand this reality of you being Brahman, it will be always active in your memory. So that means there is always this active feeling of expansion, active feeling of what? Limitless. Right? First of all, any feeling, can it be infinite? Tell me. No. Why? Because it begins at a period of time. When it begins now, it means it was not there for how long?
For so long.
For so long. And once and then whatever starts, it has to end. So it is not going to be there for what? Eternity. So therefore that cannot be equated to limitlessness. Please understand, some feeling of expansion cannot be equated to limitlessness. It's a whole different paradigm we are talking about.
Something that never started, they never finished.
Absolutely, that is limitless. It is the very truth of time. It is the very truth of space. You can't contain it as a feeling in your head.
Like you were saying, who caused it? Where did that come from?
Absolutely. So it is from which, right, the time and space comes. It being the very truth of time, it is causeless cause. Everything else is within time and space. Birth within time, and it lasts for a while and it goes. This is being the very cause. It is something which is not subject to time. Being the truth of time, it is what? Not constrained by time. The awareness, this is why it requires a certain understanding. It requires a lot of reflection. It's not easy to just grasp like that.
You can understand it, but you can't grasp it.
That's the thing.
I know what you're
So that
saying, but
means
to grasp the extent, the enormity of it is impossible.
Because see what happens is,
you're trying to do it with a limited tool,
Yes.
with our intellect, which is also limited.
Which is
see,
also
the limited intellect can understand this reality because this reality is something that you don't need to produce. It's already there.
yeah. That's why.
That's why you can understand.
But the limited Bhagat is asking who caused that.
That's the thing.
That is where you answer.
So, yeah.
But
But that's why that whole methodology of Shastra, it actually makes you think about the presence of that awareness which you first did not even know it was there.
yes.
Right? Then it makes you see that everything which is within object and time and space is mithya. It has a dependent reality. Okay? Then what the only thing which remains is what? This reality, which doesn't fall within the time and space mithya world. Okay? So it makes you think, then it also makes you think about how did this object world and time and space come about. This is where Ishvara comes. This is where Rashna is waiting.
They also got Ajay, gave a cold, so she would stay.
Exactly. So that Ishvara, so that means the whole thing you understand through Shastra. And then your buddhi is able to figure it out. And very extensive reasoning is used. A lot of analysis is used. It's not just loose statements thrown here and there, right? To make it into a solid knowledge. Okay? Then a lot of practices are given to prepare you to gain this knowledge. So that, because if you really want to understand that, your mind has to reach a level that is able to understand the meaning without what? Distorting. And in small things, if we distort, right, in a small thing I'm not able to have a proper relationship, I have to use the same mind to understand this final reality. How will it ever understand? So that means the whole preparation is what? Even at this level, I have to what? Make my mind objective and be in touch with reality and take out that distortion. That whole thing becomes a process of preparing oneself so that one can capture this reality. Okay, so therefore it is just by memory, it is not going to be accomplished. Na bahuna shrutena. Okay, so all these are important, but they alone cannot suffice, right? You need intellect, you need to certain amount of memory power. Because why do you need memory? Because by the time I finish one part of the teaching, the other part is forgotten. Then how it all connects together is forgotten. So therefore you do need memory, but memory alone is not sufficient. Okay? So the other one is bahuna shrutena. Now imagine if the Shravanam is what? That listening to what the teacher is saying. In that, he says, even if you listen and listen and listen again and again and again and again, it may not what? Produce the knowledge. Why?
Because you have to absorb it and understand it.
Absolutely. So you listen to it, and let's say if the teacher himself or herself hasn't understood, and it gives you kind of a confused idea, no matter how long you listen, you will be confused only. So it's extremely important. I tell you, for Vedanta, you need to pray for a right teacher, because you can dedicate your life to somebody and some learning which actually doesn't have the whole. It may help you partially, because it may make you recognize a few things which are useful, and it will kind of make you grow and all, but it may not lead to the culmination of the proper understanding, because the person himself or herself has no clarity, not total clarity, total clarity. Okay, so therefore alone kind of listening. And now the second scenario is, let's say the teacher has clarity, but does it mean that the entire clarity will be transferred to you? Even that is not possible. So therefore there are two different steps to this whole learning. One is called Shravanam. Shravanam is listening, but listening means Tatparya Nishchaya also. Tatparya Nishchaya means Vedanta, what is it actually saying? Is it talking about one Atma, or is it talking about many Atma?
Many Atmas.
No. So that's exactly. So
all the Atmas are going into one, no?
So that means,
that's what I mean.
yeah, so that means, yeah. Is it talking about the Jiva and Ishvara being essentially one, or two different realities? One. So that means, because there are different scholars who look into the Vedas and come up with different answers. Different answers. So now, what is it that Veda is really conveying? That also requires analysis. Okay, and this whole thing of the Shastra Tatparya Nishchaya is embedded in the teaching. Adi Shankaracharya, when he writes commentaries on Upanishads, he first says, right, what is it saying? Then he brings in all the other schools of thought, and he enters into discussion, and he says, hey, this way you can't take it because logically it falls apart. So that is, so much analysis is done. It's a very rigorous study. It's not just, saying something here and there. Okay, so therefore that is Shravanam. The second is Mananam. Okay, the Mananam process is that, okay, I understand that Shastra is talking about one Atma. Shastra is talking about essential identity between Jiva, the individual, and Ishvara, the cause of the universe. All this, and there is one limitless thing from which everything comes, by which the whole Jagat is sustained, unto which the whole universe collapses. All this I understand that Shastra is saying, but does it mean that I have understood it clearly? No. So that means that whole process of removing your own doubts, that is called Mananam. One is understanding what first of all Shastra is talking about. Second is making that vision not only what Shastra says, but is what I understand, by removing all the doubts. So therefore, asking questions becomes a very important part of learning. Because unless you remove your own doubts, you just are blindly accepting what somebody else is saying. That's why the whole teaching, whether you study Bhagavad Gita or you study Upanishads, it's all in form of a dialogue. Teacher-student dialogue. And all the different students are portrayed as very brilliant people, highly accomplished. Nobody is a loser. Nobody is somebody who doesn't know anything. Arjuna, brilliant. Nachiketa, brilliant. Bright, intelligent, responsible, ethical. Each character is an amazing character. Okay? But they want to know something more about life than what eyes can meet. So therefore, the questioning is encouraged in this whole learning. Any teacher who is threatened by questions means that is wobbly in the knowledge. Okay? I remember when I first came to Vedanta, you know how we feel that we just can't accept anything, and we are like rebellious, and I was a 22-year-old, and my teacher was like obviously maybe in his 60s and all, and he's a very kind of well-known and I used to just go and yeah, but why like that and why like that? But not once he made me feel as though I was not behaving properly. He loved it. He loved the fact that I was not just somebody who will just blindly take everything that he says as the truth. He got stimulated. He says, at least somebody is coming and asking me, but why like this and why not like that? So that means in the whole teaching, it's not obedience which is encouraged. What your personal thinking is critical to understanding. Mananam. Encouraged. The good teachers, they love it when somebody is asking right questions, which pushes that normal level of understanding to another level of understanding. Okay, so Mananam is a very important process. The third one is what we call Nididhyasanam. Nididhyasanam means that, okay, even if, let's say, there are two aspects of our mind. One is what we call cognitive mind, and the other one is emotional mind. Okay, so there are some people who are cognitively brilliant. They just, sometimes when what we struggle with, if physicists listen to Vedanta, they find it much easier to understand. Because they have sharp cognitive skills. So when you give your arguments and all, they don't struggle with those arguments. They see, yeah, that's true. Okay, but at the same time, it's not the only skill, because it's not understanding. If I have to understand, for example, some equation, I just need what? Cognitive skills. But if I have to understand the nature of I, and if I have an emotional load, and if the teaching is I is free, then what will happen? Even if you cognitively understand, what will happen? All your emotional load will interfere. It is interesting. I have seen it with my own eyes, and that happens to us, all of us. It's not like this person or that person. It happens to everyone. Okay? So there is a lag between what I understand and how I behave. So that means that whole integration, my whole person has to what? Undergo reorientation and transformation to align with this bigger reality that I have understood. Okay, so I'll just give you a real life example that I know one student who was studying with us, and he had a very difficult childhood. Okay, so he was adopted by his parents, so he didn't know who his real parents were, and also when he was young, his father used to beat him up, right? So then that like leaves a trauma, and there's an adopted child, so not even a real father, and then so he had a very tough time in his childhood, and then he ran away from home. So he was like what, 14, 15, and he ran because he couldn't, Now this child, this man, now when he came to our course, he didn't know, he just ran away somewhere, and then he was in Rishikesh somewhere, and then he heard that there is this course, so he just said, okay, now I'll come for the course. It turned out this guy, he was brilliant. He was so sharp, his intellect was like, it's just incredible. I have never met anybody who's so intelligent. Anything he will pick up, he will figure out all the ideas. Even in Sanskrit he was outstanding. Even sometimes the teachers would ask him, how this is connected to that. He's just so brilliant. Okay, while all this learning is taking place, his emotional life interferes. All the pain of childhood, which is somehow suppressed, it all surfaces. It surfaces to the extent that this guy is just on some days is paralyzed. Can't cope, because every pain which was stored, it starts coming out. And in this 3.5-year course, there is no escape. You don't go out. You are staying there. And there you don't have TV. You don't have any other newspaper, nothing. You're just with the books and the vision. There are no escapes. And actually, in this universe, in fact, all this has to be sorted out. So this is an opportunity for him to sort out. But when that happens, there is pain. More pain than before. Because before it is all what? Suppressed in the corner, and therefore there is this whole emotional side which has to get well. And there were days that he would just break down, and he would tell us that this knowledge doesn't do anything to help me in my emotional well-being. I want to leave. Then we say, if you leave, what will happen? You go back to your old way of being and all that. Nothing gets solved, it only gets suppressed. I said, this is an opportunity for you to actually work it out. One day or the other you have to work it out. This is such a beautiful environment, non-threatening environment, where everybody is there, everybody is helping you, our teacher is highly evolved, and you need to just undo this. So therefore, now this person is doing extremely well. He hung around because we all gave him support, and he completed his studies, and now because he was so brilliant and he had left home and all, he didn't know what to do after the course. So our teacher said, now you need nourishment. You need to go back and you need to nourish yourself. So he sent him to some computer education. Then he did so well in that. Then he got a very nice job. Then he went to Poland and I don't know, so many countries, and he's got married and he has a child and he's doing extremely well.
Just one quick question. The 3.5-year course, I mean, it's a very silly question to ask, but everybody sort of attains that full vision mostly?
No, not really. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because people come from so many different backgrounds and so many different baggages and so many, there's a big kind of a range, span of the cognitive capacities of people and all that, So it doesn't. And sometimes it's interesting question because our teacher used to. So what I'm saying is that nididhyasanam is a very important process because there are two aspects. One is what the cognitive mind and the other one is the emotional mind. So the knowledge is complete when what? Both aspects integrate. Otherwise it's not complete.
So how does that happen?
So that's why you listen to all these, all this Shastra helps you. When we studied Gita, how many different frameworks we talked about in terms of personal growth? Do you remember some of them? No. See, that's the thing. We talked about Karma Yoga. See, that's the thing, that we think that we understand, but we actually don't.
What I'm thinking about is Mahabharata and all the different people. That's not what we want.
But that could be taken, the stories could be taken, and we can actually, then why certain people behave like that. But within Bhagavad Gita itself there are frameworks.
You taught us in Shastras how the few steps, like about how, I don't know the terminologies, but I remember what you taught us and how you can improve as a person.
Absolutely.
And how you should do certain things so that you evolve from where you are.
Absolutely. So in the next verse it's talking about what are those, I will remind you of some of the things that we have studied, is some of the frameworks that are given in Bhagavad Gita, right? So you remember. But here what I want to show is na bahuna shrutena, right? So neither, so only listening without this mananam and nididhyasanam. Nididhyasanam requires what? A lot of getting well at an emotional level. Having right relationship with your emotions, your whole thing about your own self-esteem, then your relationship with the world and how you view your position in the scheme of things, all that has to undergo major shifts. Unless that is done, it seems as though this knowledge is not complete, which is true because it's not complete. It's good to know that it's not complete. Because there are a lot of people who say, I understand. I said, hey, what do you understand? There is so much, if there is not total understanding and if you feel I understand, there is a problem. It's better to think, yes, I'm in process of knowing and I will get there. True. There are parts that you understand. There are parts that you don't understand so well. And there are some connections which you see and there are some other connections which you don't see. So that's why it requires repeated exposure. Because in Shastra, both things are taken care of. The vision as well as what? Different frameworks for you to grow. Both are part of this teaching. So that's why it's complete. Right? So therefore, this is what we say, Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. And that's why it says, Yam eva esha vrunute tena labhyaha. So that means you have to choose to know this reality. Okay? Now, that is something called, that choice is what we call Purushartha. Okay? Purushartha means you have to choose. Arjuna was given, Arjuna knew Lord Krishna for a long time, right? When did this Gita happen?
In the time of the war.
In the middle of the war. And why did it happen? Because
of his,
make a decision of the
because he couldn't for such that the questions are right.
so that means Arjuna asked for it. Asked for it.
Circumstances brought
This
the question down.
absolutely. The circumstances that Arjuna had to go through brought those questions up, which otherwise never came up. You're so busy living your life in whatever way, and accomplishments and skills, and skill development and making money and having fun, which is all fine, right? But certain essential questions remain unanswered. The circumstances provide what? Some impetus for you to ask. Not that every person who goes through difficult situation asks. Even that is not true. Even that is not true. Okay, but at least it what throws you off your normal paradigm and makes you think about life differently. Okay, so therefore you need to choose. Now this pursuit is not just philosophical, it is also spiritual. So what is the difference between philosophy and spirituality?
Philosophy is more with the mind, it's more cognitively. Yeah.
Philosophy is cognitive, right? It's looking into things and understanding it well. Spiritual means what? It has to lead to personal transformation. It cannot just be understanding at, so the whole purpose of this learning is not to just kind of have a mental gymnastic, and because Vedanta is mental. It is extremely involved, right? It is not easy, it's not simple.
Yeah.
So that means you have to be a clear thinker, but it is not just, there are some people who make it into mental gymnastic. Okay, it is not. It has to lead to clarity, and that clarity has to translate into what? Your change. You have to change the way you do things and the way you understand the world and the way you think and the way you see yourself in the grand scheme of things. You have to change. It's a very fundamental shift. Okay? And in order for that shift to happen, there are two aspects to this learning which you must know. And if you don't know the distinction between these two, you can be learning Vedanta for years and you have no idea what you're doing. Okay? So therefore, you need to know the distinction between knowledge and action. And action. So, what is, if I ask you just a question, what is knowledge and what is action? And are they different?
The one leads to the other.
One leads. Wonderful. But what is the difference then? One leads to the other means what is one and what is the other?
Understanding something. Knowledge or to better action.
Knowledge is to do with your internal self, thought, but isn't that also an action? Thinking, isn't that also an action?
Knowledge leads to action?
No, that's true. The nature of your actions
Should be dictated by your clarity of mind.
absolutely that do, right? But there is a fundamental difference. This is Shastra. The Shastras are ingenious, right? They'll make you think about things that you'll never think about. That is really, it's amazing how your analytical capacity just is developed to an extent which is just unbelievable. Okay, the Shastra makes a distinction between action and knowledge by defining what is knowledge and what is action. It says action is Purusha Tantram. Purusha Tantram means it is centered on one's free will.
Centered on?
One's free will. Okay, so in any given situation, how I respond, it's what my free will. I may be passive, I may not do anything, I may, absolutely, I may do something, absolutely. Kartum shakyam, akartum shakyam, and anyathava kartum shakyam. So that means I can do something, I need not do something, and I can do things differently. And there are n number of options as to what I can do. So that is action. Action is centered on free will. Okay, knowledge is not centered on free will. It is what? Vastu Tantram. If I ask you, what is this nut? Cashew nut, right? Now, if in case you don't like cashew nut, but you like, let's say badam, you like pistache, right? Do you have, does your free will have any? It cannot convert this.
It's a fact.
It's a fact. Vastu Tantram. Vastu Tantram means if I ask you what is, your free will cannot interfere. Exactly. Your free will has no influence on this. It is what it is, and you have to what option do you have but to capture it as it
And it
is.
is my free will to decide to eat or not to eat.
Excellent. Your free will is whether to eat it or not, it's okay. But in knowing what this is, your free will has no role to play. It is Vastu Tantram. It is as good as what things are. Right? So in this pursuit, there are two things. One is Atma, the nature of Atma, which is Vastu Tantram or Purusha Tantram? Vastu Tantram. This Atma, whether you know it or not, it is that. It is what it is. It doesn't depend upon your doing something, not doing thing, or your thinking of it as this way or that way. It is just what is. Right? So therefore, the whole pursuit is what? Vastu Tantram. It's not your option what you want Atma to be. It is what it is. And you capture it as it is. Okay? But there is one part of the pursuit which is Purusha Tantram. Which part is Purusha Tantram? Which is dependent upon your free will, whether you come here or not. That is free will. Like how she says, this whether I eat or not is free will.
So whether you want to get that knowledge of the Atma or not is up to you.
Yeah, whether you see the value for it or not, whether you make time for it or not, after having listened to it, how much you kind of, when in your decision making you incorporate, all this is what? Free will. That is.
So basically, Atma is what it is. That is Vastu Tantra knowledge, and whether I want to know about it or not is Purusha Tantra. It is the realm of action.
Absolutely. Whether you want to know it, and after having listened, how much you make an effort to change, reorient, question your previous assumption. All this is Purusha Tantra.
I think in all this, the emotional part will be the hardest. This is my sense. To get into that space where you're totally not colored, you're not seeing things in a colored way. And this is what my sense is. Yeah.
According to them, there's a fine divide between that. There's a very fine line.
See,
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. It's very difficult. Correct.
How much do you use that knowledge to transform yourself? Absolutely.
And how much do you act on that? That's
how much do you transform your thinking, or your spiritual growth?
Trying to know about
Very different things.
that's the realm
How to handle
of
it.
your thinking, isn't it?
no, because see that there is a whole methodology which is making you think about your relationship, the awareness with, for example, time. You use your mind. And the mind can figure it out. Actually, it can figure it out. A limited mind has been given the capacity to figure out. That's why you need Shastra. Shastra, when it tells you and it makes you, throws light on something which already is, what does it do? Lifts your veil of ignorance. That's why the Guru itself, the name comes from that. Well, who is a Guru? Gukaraha andakaraha vai rukarasta nivartakaha andakara nirodhitvat guru iti abhidhiyate. Who is a Guru? There is andakara. Andakara means ignorance. And what does the Guru do? Doesn't do anything, just unveils, just lifts so that you can see what is. Doesn't produce anything. It's not that the Guru has some special access to divinity which you don't have, and then if you are submissive, will just kind of give you this spark of divinity. Nothing of that sort. Whatever is already is. The Guru just makes you connect to that reality.
The veil, there is freedom. So how much you choose to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once he's raised the veil.
That's why your capacity to see, for example, so many people are in a physics class, right? And what is the teacher doing? Lifting the veil with reference to that given subject matter. Now, how much of this is lifted, it really depends upon. That's why when the exam comes, what happens? The teacher asks some little questions which are a little tricky, and then that tests how much you really understood. Right? So that means you can't say that people have not lifted, but they have lifted what in different degrees. Some areas are clear, some areas are not clear. Who gets the first rank? Who's clear? Absolutely. Right? So in fact every guru is like that. Not only Vedanta guru, every other guru is like that. Guru in general is like that. Okay? The guru doesn't produce gravity. Gravity is already there. Guru just lifts your ignorance. Okay? So therefore, this is what but to expose, you need to make a choice. So that means there is two things. Now, for knowing Atma, if you start using your free will, you are on a wrong track. Because you want Atma to be like this, then you are you are imagining things and project your own thing. There you will go wrong. Now, when there is a free will, and if you don't use that free will and say, oh, Atma is already free, Atma is already free, you don't get anywhere. Both have their scope. What is where, you have to be clear. This is what all clarity means. Everything is jumbled in our mind. We don't know where is it that we have to use our free will, and where is it where we just have to know things as they are. Even that clarity we don't have. So therefore, the pursuit requires all these discretion, and once all these preparations are done, it says beautifully, Atma vivrunute tanum swam. As though once you are ready, what? Atma will reveal its true nature. Once you are ready. And once you've done what? Both listening and also what?
So it doesn't come like a eureka moment.
It is a slow. It is like, this jigsaw puzzle. Once you put one part, then you put another part, then you put another part. So that means you are learning, right? But as you learn and as you begin to then connect all the parts accurately, and the whole picture is totally clear, then it is what? This is what we call knowledge. That means what?
Listening and
Reflection and that personal transformation. All three, Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana. Okay? So therefore, until then, you are in the process of knowing. Right? It's not like you don't know anything, and it's not also that you have completed this knowledge. Okay? There is this whole, what we call, process of learning. Growing clarity. Our teacher used to also give an example of a Polaroid camera. There used to be this, you touch, initially what? It's all fuzzy. So first time you listen to Vedanta, it's like, what is going on here? You feel it's just talking about something too extraordinary or whatever. Then there is a little bit, the images emerge. Then you see a little bit, you begin to recognize who are the people. And then what? When it's fully done, then what? You see clearly. Clear picture. Yeah. So therefore, that is this whole process. And once you have, it is one thing that you must know, that how much you will understand. Can you have a total say over it? You have no say over it. You can only do what? Your part of listening to it, and then reflecting, and also kind of bringing your whole emotional life in harmony with what you, exactly. Or that's the only thing you can continue to do. When it will, when that you, that Absolutely, that you have no control over. So that is what they say. The ultimate thing is in the hands of Ishvara. How much you understand. That's why you need prayer. That's why you need prayer. You need to pray for clarity. Even when you are in this thing, you need Ishvara. There is no Vedanta without Ishvara. We will talk a lot about Ishvara. There are verses which are coming, because it says it will reveal itself, means what? You have no control. You can't say tomorrow I want clarity. You can't say, many people say, nah, this is the last life I want. I said, it's not up to us. You can pray for it. If you want it, you can pray for it. But it's not in your hand. You can try. Okay? So therefore, here it says, Atmanam pranote swam. Okay? Now, what the Purusha Tantra part of your making effort to grow is explained in the next verse. Do we have time?
You told me last time, Krishna brought you
To,
to
yes,
now
absolutely.
It makes sense what you're saying.
Absolutely.
So it is not in our hands.
It is not in your hand.
He shows you the path, how to go about it, where to go, how to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Anjali, because really there are so many seekers and people all want to know, and whatever, who connects to whom
Is very important.
is ultimately not in our hands at all.
How did you come into my life?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I was seeking.
Absolutely.
People to have come there.
No, that is true.
And
Right.
there is some grace, there is some Ishvara which is
His guidance
putting
is there.
people together.
There is grace.
2-3 years
there is
ago,
nothing much
I
to
didn't
do
even
without.
know you existed, and you didn't know I existed.
Very right.
I was also looking for such a long time.
Me too.
And then suddenly.
It is,
And so
yeah.
many people you go to.
Yeah,
Then you go to-
don't get the
it's not
satisfaction.
It's not enough.
See,
Your answers are not being met.
absolutely.
Why is it like this?
Yes.
But why is it like this?
Yes.
I have a question. When we talk about this whole thing about this awareness, how did anybody discover that there is this awareness which
Yeah. Very good.
which is all pervading, which is everything? How did this knowledge even come to be? I mean,
So-
obviously some rishis or
Yeah, the rishis. Yeah, there are rishis. So therefore, actually, it's interesting because this is a very common question. So this is where this Brahma Sutra that we did, every knowledge, right, is attributed to Ishvara. Okay, way before we understood that the earth is revolving around the sun, and sun is stationary, we thought what our visual perception is what the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And what is the reality? The sun is stationary and it's earth which is revolving. Okay, way before somebody discovered that, it was already there. What did we do? We only lifted. No human being what creates any knowledge. We only
So
lift.
there were rishis in
They were rishis. So just as in science, right? There were those people are not just random people.
Yeah.
They have spent hours and days and lifetimes knowing what science, which makes them what go and have that click, have that vision, that discovery. Which then once they have discovered, what happens? It is available to us, but through what? That person doesn't come and teach me. How does that knowledge come to me?
Transmitted.
Transmitted. Guru, Shishya, Parampara. Ultimately, every knowledge is what?
Guru Shishya.
Is
Transmitted.
it is already there in Ishvara. Already figured out. Your eyes and its complexities already figured out, already made. Doctors, when they go to medical school, they just are studying the design which is already there.
The cure for cancer is already there.
It's already there.
Out there.
And after 8 years of studies, what? You still don't understand totally everything.
They still say we don't know.
There's so many things they don't know.
But that's true. I think that's true in every realm of knowledge.
So that means that exactly.
They never know the whole
Any-
knowledge. The whole knowledge is never there.
In the mithya world, so that is very interesting. In mithya world, ultimately you can't come to finality. You cannot come to finality because there is no the real substance there. The finality is only in this knowledge, because this is something which is not within the realm of time, space and object. That's why they say this knowledge is extraordinary knowledge. You know, it's not an ordinary knowledge. Whether you recognize or not, it is just incredible. Okay, so this rishis, exactly. So that means nothing, right? So that means, so it is like, how did this Newton come to know about laws of gravity? How?
He still experimented. What would our Shastras do?
That is. It is mind-boggling. So that's why they say it was revealed to them. Revealed to them in the sense that, yeah. But revealed then doesn't mean, because I can also claim this was revealed to me, and you can claim something else was revealed to you. So who will know whether so this is why what is true and what is untrue. That's why there is a very rigorous analysis. Right? So if what is revealed is right, even today it cannot be contradicted by reasoning. That's what gives it strength. Because if anything I say and I say it's revealed, then what? You can't accept everything.
So many religions are based on that. That somebody said, I've got the religion.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've got it.
Unfortunately. So that's why the strength is not what because this said or because that said, but what is said right now we examine and we say that there is no way to contradict what it says. That's what gives it strength.
It doesn't connect with the avatars and all, no.
Sorry?
Even we have discussed avatars, of course it's another time.
Yeah.
Digressing.
Yeah.
But
But
that would have
no, because I think, yeah, anybody, so you can, you don't need to, because see, for example, even Einstein discovered so many things during his lifetime. He's not an avatar. He's a rishi. He's a rishi. Why? Because something which was already there is a rishi, because he just saw something which nobody else saw. And now, then when he saw that, does it mean that everybody else said, yeah, he saw, so therefore it is right? No. He has to go through rigorous inquiry. He has to sit in front of all scientists and they are all asking him questions, and he has to what? Prove. He has to prove himself. And therefore, in that question and answer is the very methodology of teaching. Same thing. These rishis saw, but it's not that, because they say it, therefore it is true. All these different questions that you can think from the standpoint, in those times there were different philosophers who were entering into debate. Now you have what neurosciences, you have quantum physics, you have cognitive psychology, everything you can use, and you still can show that it is non-contradictory. So what is the very proof is what it is non-contradictable. That what they say, pramana is what? That something which you cannot, this knowledge, you cannot arrive at just with your five senses, but you also cannot contradict with your reasoning. You cannot arrive at it because it's not an object. Your senses can only look at objects. It is about the subject, that you can't use your normal process of knowing. But when it shows, when the words show you what it is, right, you have no way to contradict it. And all these puzzles that you can never answer otherwise, it all what gets answered. This This is the magnitude of this knowledge.
And so we cannot come to the knowledge through our five senses,
But you can, yeah, but you cannot contradict it also with your reasoning.
this knowledge was revealed to them, and they passed it down
Through this whole, that's
all
why
verbal.
it's all verbal, it's all shabda pramana. Until this parampara is, yeah. So that means that the teacher now can also be talking about it, and it is distorted. They can distort. It is getting.
For example, the word Atma, how distorted
It is absolutely.
So that's what I told you, that it is finally come into clarity. Even though I'm doing Vedanta with the children, my teacher just, you keep questioning, but the answers are not coming.
Absolutely.
The last term,
Yes.
satisfied to clarity for me.
Absolutely.
And that's what I told you.
But I think there weren't like formulas to transform that.
Sorry? So that's why we use this methodology. Right? So that means, because if I just make a statement, maybe it's a statement of fact that you are limitless. What is it going to do to you? You'll get nothing out of it, even though it may be a statement of fact. That means the whole key is what? In the methodology. How I employ different methods to make you see what is. So much analysis. For what? To make you see what is. Which is already there.
But the main rishis who pass the knowledge down,
Yes.
okay, I'm just talking about in the form of Vedanta, I'm not just talking about physics and science and whatever, and those formula, whatever. I'm talking about the Gyan, the knowledge,
Yes.
which has been passed down
Yes.
from generation to
Generation.
generation. The first people, the first batch of rishis, I'm just using the word batch, they must have really said it so correctly. For it to have
Absolutely.
come down, even in a distorted fashion, up to you.
Absolutely. And even now, you still have a tradition which is undistorted. Right? It's still continuing because it's making you see things without any, right? There may have been some distortions here and there, right? But there is still one tradition which still carries it. Yeah, it maintains that. Yeah, it.
Shankaracharya interpreted what was written. But it had to come down orally. We don't know how much distortion is there. But he said
Adi Shankaracharya, with the brilliance of his mind, I'm sure he would have recognized distortion if he saw it. I don't know.
Yeah. See, see, one thing is very important. That's true. That's why now there are different people who contributed to this tradition. It's an oral tradition, but Vyas, he is the one who actually wrote it down. The first that written, 4 Vedas classification. The whole thing is attributed to Vyasa. Then Adi Shankaracharya. So no, it just like so every mantra which was orally, he codified everything and he made it into 4 Vedas: Yajurveda, Samaved, Rigved, and Atharvaved. Just 4. The whole thing is attributed to him.
My God, how could he have done it in his lifetime?
That's what
That
he
is,
got
and
the-
even Mahabharata
how
is
he-
attributed to
but
him.
tell her how he did it also. There's a whole story behind how
This
Vyasa
Ganesha,
did it.
the
has to
Ganesha,
be.
So there are.
It's not, I mean, who knows if it's true or not, but it's not humanly possible.
It is absolutely.
Of course, it has to be something.
So that
Has to
means
be.
there is
You are
some.
given the power, the gyan, the wisdom, the knowledge, the memory, everything to put it down, and he did it without.
Stopping.
Not that it is the world's first internet. Knowledge is reading something somewhere
That's a good one.
that this is the world's first internet because all the knowledge was just contained.
Wikipedia.
Yeah.
What a person, what a gyan. And for he had to have been given the power, not to have done this. It's not his free will to have done it. He was given it. Otherwise,
correct. He's the first person who wrote it down.
yeah.
Then
All of them, 4 of the Vedas.
4 Vedas. Then there
And
are,
why he separated the Vedas also, there is a...
yeah, he kind of, yeah. Then there was this Adi Shankaracharya.
Yeah.
He was another very important person in the tradition, because he wrote commentaries on, there are 10 Upanishads on which he wrote commentaries. So therefore, huh? Adi Shankaracharya was, I think,
7th, 8th century.
I think 7th, 8th, yeah.
7th, 8th century.
Wow. 7th, 8th century.
I think so. Even I don't know when, but and then yeah. So that is the tradition. So when Adi Shankaracharya was writing, there were a lot of other schools of thought, right? So that is like what she is saying, that there are a lot of other people who are looking at the Vedas and coming up with what different interpretation. So that means that there is, as I told you, I think, I don't know, last time, that you have Nayayika, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, then Purva Mimamsa. So they are all looking into Veda, but they have a different understanding of what Veda is talking about.
Vastly differ, or is
It
all the
is,
same?
no, it differs. So what Adi Shankaracharya did was, he entered into discussions with them, and he logically, and even at that time what was very popular is Buddhism. So he entered into debates and he defeated all of them in. That's how he re-established Hinduism in India.
So have they changed? Because
So
of
that
their
means,
or they still maintain?
sorry.
Have they changed their point of view, or the other schools?
So these other schools, I mean, at that time, some continue the yoga. They have their own philosophy. They have their own thing. Buddhism continues. There are always some people who will buy that. But I mean, he made a huge contribution by entering into debates.
He died very young.
32, 33. Yeah. So this is where the whole tradition comes, and the teacher, in this whole tradition, what the teacher is one who can lift the veil, because the teacher has clarity and the teacher has methodology.
Because they analyze and analyze.
Yeah, and the whole method is embedded in Adi Shankaracharya's commentaries. It tells, we don't need to invent our own. We can be creative and we can use certain methods and all, but most of it is all given. It's all there. Water.
Search for truth with students. I think I'm over-analyzing sometimes, like maybe I get into a situation and why did I do this and I shouldn't do. Does one go through that? Because it's the mind is just going like a monkey with a razor or something.
No, see, it depends upon how much, where is it that the mind has to be applied, and where is it where you don't need to just kind of, keep on. This question is something which is an important question, and the answer is that you need to be a sharp thinker. You can't just leave everything, whatever. You need to be a sharp thinker. But that sharpness of thinking, you can't just apply at the wrong place.
That's why you say you have to have the right question.
At the right, yeah, absolutely. Because that sharpness of thinking, if you then come home and keep on interrogating your servant, why did you do this and why did you do you go mad, right? So that means you have to apply it at the right place and right time. So this is why.
Come when you clear your mind a bit of the cover.
Yes. See, also just in a day-to-day situation, what is interesting is that when I remember I tell this to many of my students, we did this GMAT when I was young, right? In GMAT, it's a very interesting thing. They give you a scenario, and within that scenario, you have to identify what is the goal, what is it that you have to achieve in this given situation, what are the major factors which will enable you to achieve this, what are the minor factors which are not directly connected but they are secondary, right? What is something which is irrelevant information, because there is so much information is given which is actually not relevant at all. And there are which are the variables which are important but they are not in your control. What happens is, in our mind, everything is, all information is there, all jumbled up. We are not able to figure out, filter and say, hey, what is relevant here? What is not so relevant but is something which is relevant? What is something that is not at all relevant but I keep on repeating? What is it over which I have no control? It's important but I can't do anything about, so I can't get worked up. That means you need to think, but if in that thinking, if you something which is irrelevant and you keep thinking about it, it is what? Useless.
Even if you know it, you can't stop it.
So this is why you have, so therefore these are all the practices is what you say, so that means you need also meditation, you need yoga, so it is lots of things come up. So that means thinking per se is very necessary. But this useless thinking is something that you need to be very deliberate about. So just because that thinking takes you to places, you can't eliminate thinking. You need to make it sharper and relevant. Right? So therefore, that whole growing as an individual and all this is all Purusha Tantra. It requires time, it requires effort, it requires dedication.
That is why they say one lifetime is also not enough.
Yeah, that's why they say that it can actually continue for lifetimes.
Many
But when you come to Vedanta, you at least set your whole path, absolutely, and then you start walking. Otherwise, you don't even know where you're going, what you're doing. Absolutely, absolutely. Lifetimes of punya gets you here. This is what they say. Even to come to the right teaching, you need amazing amount of punya. Amazing amount of punya. Otherwise, you're just not given an opportunity to listen to this. Because you haven't yet come to that level. Okay, so this is the whole teaching. So now, next time I will do different frameworks, because the next verse is talking about growing. So I'll remind you of different frameworks that we have done in Bhagavad Gita. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.